Hello and welcome to another episode of On the Couch with Claire. My name is Claire Rowe and this is the podcast exploring psychology, relationships and health. So first and foremost, thank you for choosing to spend a bit of your time today listening to something that just might make a bit of a change for the better in your life. Today's topic actually makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, and to be honest, I don't even know why. Today we are talking about money. Yep, how financially literate are you? Do you know the real cost of those credit cards with the attractive points? I do kind of like those myself. Do you know the difference between good debt and bad debt? And do your eyes roll to the back of your head like mine do when someone suggests writing out a budget? Ugh. Well, today I have someone with us who is going to hold my hand and yours through this and explain why financial literacy and confidence is so important, especially for women. Melissa Browne is an ex-financial advisor, ex-accountant, and she went from having less than nothing in her 30s to financial independence by her 40s. I don't think that was with any kind of pyramid scam either, or selling a kidney. So I think this is all legit. She's the author of the appropriately titled book, Unfuck Your Finances. And now, through her online courses and platform, including the Financial Adulting Plan, she's on a mission to help others out of their states of shame and denial and create financial freedom. So, Melissa Browne, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I do feel slightly like my heart rate is slightly raised. I don't even know why. And this is bizarre because I do consider myself, moderately financially literate. And I do have some type of interest in, having a conversation around the stock market or, the dynamics between inflation and interest rates. So I'm not completely in denial, but I still go, oh, money. And why for me, but why in general is this such a hard topic that people avoid?
It's so, well, first of all, that's so normal and that's something that I hear a lot. So it's okay. We're friends here.
I feel like, this is therapy for me. Like it's really.
I feel like we need to do some box breathing together. But I think part of the reason is there's so much shame and vulnerability around talking about money, and particularly for women. If we gender it, we receive such different messages when it comes to money, that when it comes to guys, if we don't feel like we have enough, if we don't feel like we're the one that can take control, there might be sheer shame and fear around that. With women, it might be that we don't feel enough, might be that we don't feel like we're keeping up. So there's shame and vulnerability around there, or even around the perception that the media tells us that we're overspenders and that we need to cut back. And if we're not doing that, therefore we're uncomfortable. But we weren't taught it at school. There's no money class generally that we take. Often we don't talk about it at home. Yeah. So therefore it becomes this uncomfortable, secret, hidden thing that does all the things that you just talked about, raises our heart rates, makes us feel uncomfortable. So what do we do when that happens? We avoid it.
Yeah. And shame. As a psychologist, we know that, shame is a very powerful emotion. There's a lot of research now about that. And I think that is probably something that most people can attest to. And it's just easier to keep that box closed. Yeah. But then it's also that nagging thing at the back of our heads because it's the topic that obviously the longer we do keep that box closed, the worse maybe the situation's going to be. And so the Band-Aid needs to come off and we need to be very vulnerable, at least with ourselves, and open to sitting down and saying, okay, what's my financial situation, relationship with money, knowledge about money, and just put it out there. Do you think, in a very broad sweeping stereotype way, is there a difference between the sexes of how they approach things? Because I kind of feel like, again, stereotype, but men might approach money in a far more emotionally neutral stance.
Yeah.
Would you say that?
Look, yes and no. So certainly in my experience, and I've been doing this for more than 20 years, so obviously since I was 10, But there is a difference generally between how the different sexes approach money. And often that has to do with the very different upbringings or the way that media already talks to us. So just think about how the media talks to men and women about money. And Starling Bank have done research around this, where they looked at what are the media stories saying to men, for example, and 90% of stories used fear as a technique against men. 70% of stories said money makes you more of a man. So all of the stories around you need to have more, you need to be the one in charge. Whereas 65% of the stories to women were that we need to cut back. 70% of the stories were that we needed to be more frugal and how to find ways to cut back.
Right.
So already we're receiving different messages around lack and you just need to stop it, and you over here need to have more and to be more.
Okay, so you're the provider, go and earn more, but also women need to stop spending it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're out spending it, and then that's that kind of guilt shame.
Definitely. And then you imagine as we get together where then if you're a heterosexual couple, the male is looking at the female going, well, I've heard you overspend because I'm hearing it everywhere. She's looking at him going, well, maybe I should be abdicating it to you because you've been told that you do it better. And it's just a recipe for disaster, really. And it's why that money is the number one thing we fight about. We often fight about it twice a month. And yet the actual, like the research, and I'm so about research. So Warwick Business School research did a longitudinal study about investing. Both men and women outperform the index, but the women outperform the blokes.
Wow.
So there is this belief that men do money better and they should take charge, and yet women weren't prepared to risk the house. So therefore, over the long term, they made better investors.
Okay.
So it's really important to understand that a lot of these money stories and this baggage we come with is inherited, and it's such BS, and we need to put it aside and figure out what do we want that to be for us.
Yeah. So I love that you said that you rely on that research and you can bring that to the table and actually confront people with that statistic and show them, what it is. Where does, and you talk a bit in your book about this, and I've heard you talk before about the first step in financial literacy and trying to build financial freedom is maybe trying to understand your personal relationship with money or your money story, or as a very kind of Instagrammy thing to say, your money mindset these days. How important is that, and where does that money relationship start?
So if you talk to Lawsy, who's worked with me for 13, 14 years, she would say it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because for different people, and this is where money is personal, for different people like Lawsy, who is super pragmatic, she'll just go, you just need to get on with it and do it. And she's able to. So there are a portion
She's the spreadsheet person.
She's the spreadsheet person. Give her a spreadsheet, super pragmatic, send her in a direction and she'll go. But for the majority of us, it's really important. I believe it's foundational. And yes, a lot of people on Instagram are talking money mindset. The problem that I see is this work is foundational, but too many people stop there. So yes, we need to figure out our money story. We want to find out why we behave the way we are. Why are we stuck in sabotage loops? Why do we believe things that we may not even realize are actually untrue? But because we've never picked it up and looked at it, we don't know that. But what we don't want to do once we've figured that out and rewritten it is stay there. We then want to layer it with other great habits.
Yeah, because what I think about when you say people stop at that point is
it's fun. It's navel gazing. It's introspective. It's
we're going to manifest it, right?
Yeah,
we're going to manifest this money, and it's just so we can unlock the money. That stuff, the coaching.
Yes.
We're going to unlock this mindset, and then money's just going to manifest and be attracted into our lives.
Because people love knowing more about themselves. So if I can go back to my childhood and realize that my parents' experience around money, that my parents going, you just need to work hard, like that's the key to success. And me now believing that I just need to work hard. Don't need to invest. I just need to work hard. Oh, maybe that's the reason I've stopped investing. Like they're cool things to figure out. Or maybe like me, my experience where I looked at my dad doling out housekeeping to my mum. and looked at her experience where she was told whether she was allowed to work or not. And I looked at her and went, I never want to be that. So for me, power and control is a massive part of my money story. Or for a lot of women, including myself, I'm a Western Sydney chick. For me, it's about not being enough. And then bringing that to my finances. Like, that's so interesting to unpack that. And that's transformational work. But we can't stop there. We also need to learn about debt and investing and goals. And
it's the first step.
It's not as sexy.
Yeah, exactly. It is not as sexy as the navel gazer and talking and learning about yourself. That's true. And I think what you just said there, one of those money stories, it's definitely something I can relate to. I mean, I think mine parents were very much you need to work hard. You need to work hard. My parents had multiple jobs. They were tertiary educated. It was just an expectation that we went to university. That wasn't, of course you do. That's what you do. And then you work hard, and you work every hour you can, and then you will be successful. And, the very, very kind of narrow view of what success is, I think. So trying to break that down for me is the first step, as you said, but then we go from there.
Exactly.
Into exploring that. Okay. With the particularly women that you work with, because I think, your work is, working predominantly with women and I think women who don't feel confident. And I think that's probably a current theme that you see, confidence around money.
Definitely.
But tell us a little bit about the range of women that you see, because the women that do your courses I've seen have very vast backgrounds and experiences. They're not people just cut from the same cloth, are they?
And it's it's a money story. It's the only people that would join a finance course are the ones that are in trouble. They must have debt or they must be coming from a place of lack. And yes, there are absolutely women in our course, and I would suggest probably about 45% that are struggling with debt, whether it's credit card or the size of their mortgage or personal loans, and they just can't see a way out of that. They might be single mums who have really fixed income and don't know any way out of that. But then the other half, I'm on a great salary and I've got nothing to show for it. Like, I'm closet rich, asset poor. Or maybe I've just separated from my partner. I've never handled the finances before. I've actually got a bad settlement, but I don't know what to do because I've just abdicated up till now. I've had accountants and financial planners do the program.
Wow.
For them, it's kind of like builders' houses and mechanics' cars. I might be great at helping someone else, but
psychologist,
I'm not so
mental health.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right through to business owners, or one of the women that's on the film on our homepage for the sales page for the course. She's the ex-CEO of $1 billion company. And she said to me, Mel, I don't think I need an adulting course. And yet one phone call with her interest rates saved her $18,000 a year.
Wow.
And she didn't know that she could make that big a difference to her finances. So we have such a range, which is where it's realizing that you don't need to be in a bad position to do something with your finances. You just want to do better.
Yes. And for people who want financial freedom, I think for women particularly, and maybe I don't know what it is about women, but, maybe because we're the givers to others and we're the selfless ones, stereotypically, there's something about saying I want more money that's uncomfortable. Do you find that with women to saying, their ability to be able to say, I actually want to be really wealthy and I want to not think about if I want a pair of shoes or I want to shop. I just want to do it. And suddenly that's very hard to say because that seems very like, you shouldn't want to be rich.
Yeah, it's seen as not feminine, masculine. It's selfish to say that. And I hear that a lot where people feel really uncomfortable either saying the dollar figure that they're chasing or even saying they want to be wealthy. They're worried about being judged for that. They're worried about judging themselves even to put that in line. And I distinctly remember it was about 7 years ago. I was at a dinner and it was business owners. So we're used to talking about numbers. And we went around the table and everyone was saying what they wanted to achieve that year. And I remember saying, well, I want to hit $1 million in revenue. This was probably about a decade ago. And a woman came up to me after and went, "Oh, you're so brave for saying that." Like, really? Why? Like, if I've been in EO where it's 80% men, they lead with that.
Yes.
Like, it's quite literally, "Hi, I'm Ralph. I'm a $50 million turnover business." So I don't think that's the solution either. And I think it's an issue where I'm doing some work with a book I'm writing at the moment with the hero's journey versus the heroine's journey. I don't think we need to become masculine to do money, but I do think we need to find a way to be comfortable to say, it's okay to want to put your own financial oxygen mask on. It's okay to want to have choice. It's okay to want to have enough wealth that I can give back when the opportunity arrives without even having to think about it. That's okay. And it's not even just okay. That's a good thing.
Mm. And ultimately that's what it leads to, isn't it? It's freedom and choice.
Yeah.
It's choice. It's not about necessarily, I mean, your financial free life may look completely different to anyone else's, and that's okay. But it's about having the power to say, well, this is how I'm going to choose to spend my week, my day, my life.
Yeah.
And I have the ability now to do that, whether it be still working, giving back, not working, shopping, not shopping, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
But living a life that you choose.
Yeah.
You know, rather than being beholden to, being restricted otherwise. Okay.
And my concern is women are already behind the 8 ball. So there's the wages gap, there's the super gap. So if we're not making smart decisions now, then we're going to not have choice later on. And we know the stats, women over 55 are most at risk of homelessness. There's 450,000 women in their 40s at risk of homelessness at the moment, just in Australia. Like, we need to be doing something now, not just to avoid that, but to give ourselves choice.
And knowledge is power.
Yeah,
right? That's
exactly.
That's it. Okay, so let's get to some practicalities. And, you know, very hard for you to, I'm not asking you to put in your whole course into this podcast right now. You will need to go and do the course. But from what you see at the moment, and we are in, you know, some may say unpredictable times at the moment financially. And as you said, you know, the risk of homelessness these days is knife's edge stuff. It's the person who was nowhere near that years or even months ago and is now pretty close to it. So, you know, it's a bit tenuous. So what do you think the main money mistakes people are making are, other than avoidance? I'm going to say that as number one, avoidance.
Yeah.
But other than that, what are the main money mistakes that women are making?
Well, I think, yes, these are more common for women, but I'm going to say that they are also common for the blokes too.
Good.
So pressing pause until you get it right. I think that for women particularly, because so many of us want to be perfect and we've taught to be nice girls and to be good girls and to look a particular way, it's the same reason we don't ask for salary increases when the blokes do. We want to make sure we can tick all the boxes before we'll go and ask.
Or go for the job in the first place, right? If we don't fulfill the complete, I don't fulfill the criteria.
Yeah.
Rather than just, well, I'm going to give it a shot anyway.
Yep. Yeah. Whereas the reverse can often be true for our male friends. But it's pressing pause until you get it right. So instead, what would it look like if you took a step rather than figuring it all out and then taking a step? What would it look like to start walking and figuring it out as you go? Now, I've been learning French for the last year. I cannot speak it. It's horrific. But I won't even practice it with someone else in the room because I'm terrified of looking
That's been my
ridiculous.
problem with French.
Yeah.
That's been my problem.
But it's because of perfectionism. Yeah. So therefore, we hold ourselves back.
Okay.
And that's just one example. And I mean, me not speaking French, not problematic. Me pressing pause financially, hugely problematic. So pressing pause until they get it right, not asking for what we're worth. So we just gave the example of a pay rise. Let's switch it to businesses. I see it there all the time where women are not pricing appropriately in their businesses. And there, a lot of the time, if you're valuing yourself and if your money story or your self-worth is low, then you're not going to be pricing appropriately. And the ripple effect that to profitability and not asking for what we're worth. I would even add to that for a woman in business who has to pay herself super her not thinking she's worth paying super for because that's selfish. It's better for it to go into the family or the household. So not putting your own financial oxygen mask on and asking for what we're worth, and not investing for the long term and having financial independence. As I said earlier, women make incredible investors, and we don't have to be investing large amounts. If I found $20 a day, if I did that for 30 years at 8%, which is a very conservative rate, that's going to give me almost $1 million. That's life-changing money. So it's investing for the long term and having that financial independence. You know, if you're single, it's not waiting. If you're in a couple, if I'm investing for myself and something happens, which 1 in 2 marriages do, I then have choice. So those 3 things, I mean, there's so many other mistakes from Afterpay to credit card points to paying off the mortgage first before I start investing and more. But these are 3 that are really unique to women.
The waiting, I think, definitely. I've got friends who, you know, when you talk about that and you give them the example of this is how little you would need to invest and it's time in the market and, you know, this is where you would end up. Again, maybe it's the avoidance, but they glaze over because they kind of say, oh, yeah, but I need to pay down my credit card first and I need to like get on top of that and I need to work out the whole like share market thing first because I don't really understand it. I need to like do my research and figure out and that's it. It's waiting, isn't it?
Yep.
Rather than what I advise clients in many other areas of their life is like, well, if you have a goal ahead of you, whether that be to, you know, run a marathon or open a business or whatever it is, what can you do today to inch yourself closer? You know, a Google search on it, read one of your blogs or articles, you know,
what
something.
Are the steps?
Yeah, what are the steps practically?
Yep.
So it's just becomes doing rather than holding back.
And there's a tax to holding back. So compound interest is a phenomenon that where it's the longer that you are in the market, the longer you're investing, it turns into a snowball. So if I'll give you an example. So if I decided to invest $200 a month today for 30 years, I'm going to have about $300K. Which is not a small amount of money.
Absolutely, yeah.
If I waited for 20 years and paid off my mortgage and then started, and I'm going to invest exactly the same total amount, but I'm investing $600 a month for 10 years. So exactly the same amount invested, but one did it small amounts over a long time, one waited and did it for 10 years. The first person had $300,000 at the end of the investment time.
Yep.
The second person, $100,000.
Wow.
And that's the difference of time in the market. So
I don't know if that helps me or makes me more anxious. I want to run out now and, you know, get onto this. But yeah, okay. And it is. It's waiting till everything's perfect. I think that is a particularly female thing, and waiting till we've got it all perfect and then we can move forward. And it's, you know, having the confidence of the middle-aged male to say, no, I'm going to just go do it anyway. Okay, all right. You put up a post recently on social media that I just flicked through because I didn't want it on my screen for a second longer, and it was calling me out on my beautiful credit card points that pay for my holidays, Mel. They pay for my trips, and I travel on those points. I pay a huge amount for that card, but it enables me to fly, and I just like to live in that world. Yep. Can you but we're going to rip the Band-Aid off. Let's do it. So tell me about credit cards and points.
What I will say is if you're a business, in that case, credit card points are often worth it. Simply because we're not going to overspend in our business. Like I'm not going to spend extra on stationery. Well, actually, I probably am, but not much to get those points. Okay. Instead, I'm putting taxes on, I'm putting advertising. Like I just happen to spend a lot through my business, and I use points through my business, and I pay for flights and do all the things.
Okay. All right. I'm feeling all right.
So business, it's okay because I'm not going to overspend. Personal, it's a different matter. So there's the research around personal credit card points and digitized spending are that when you use credit cards, you'll overspend by 18%. So this is Dun & Bradstreet research, so an independent group. Other academics have put that as high as 100%, but let's be conservative and say it's 18%. So even if I've never spent a cent of interest, I'm overspending by 18% to get those points.
Purely because it's there.
Exactly.
The line of credit's there.
The line of credit's there. The insular region doesn't light up in my brain when I use credit cards, so therefore it hurts less, I spend more. So average household in Australia spends $32,500 on their credit cards each year. 18% of that is $5,000. So I'm spending an extra $5,000. So let's look at the points I would get for that spend. So I put it through Westpac, who have quite a good point scheme. The points I would get, 3 domestic or maybe 4 domestic flights if I'm going to Queensland, $409. But it's cost me $4,950 in overspending to get it. But we get a dopamine hit because it's free. We're excited because I'm getting something free. This is not costing me anything. And yet it's costing us $5,000 to get.
Yes. And at the end of the day, we've got to realize that why wouldn't these are products. These are products that are commercial, right? They're there by, banks, companies, businesses themselves to make a profit.
Yep.
And so no one's giving you stuff just to give you stuff here.
And again, because we don't talk about money, there's not a money class at school, financial literacy is so low, we don't realize it as a tax on things like points. We don't realize there's a tax on cute little products to make our life easier, like Afterpay. There's so much that exists that we think is helpful and that we're doing the right thing, yet actually is holding us back and really costing us financially. And I mean, if someone was going, well, I don't really have any money to invest, Mel, there's $5,000 from your overspend.
So a lot of my friends who use Afterpay would say, yeah, but this is just the old lay-by. I'm not paying interest. This is the old lay-by. This is how psychology. I can split it up.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So it's something called the framing effect. So with lay-by, and I remember that because I was of the age, it was delayed gratification. You had to pay it off and then you got it back. How Afterpay works is with something called the framing effect. So instead, if you were going to shop with us and spend $100, you would never have lifted it to $140. Yet what the brain does is it just fixates on the $25 repayment and you have no problem lifting that to $35, which suddenly is $140. And that's the Afterpay effect. So if you go onto Afterpay's own website under the retailer section, in Australia, it says the average extra spend is 18%. If I go to the UK or the US side, it says 40%, which is what Australia used to be. And I suggest that's probably what it still is. And it says you'll shop twice as much. So yes, it's not costing you interest. It seems like a lay-by. They call it a budgeting app. But actually, it's designed by a couple of white males who are now billionaires off the back of mainly millennials who are overspending.
Who are into instant gratification.
Absolutely.
And I suppose from a psychological perspective, that's the difference, right? So you've received your item already. Mm-hmm. You're then paying it off over the next, whatever it is, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks into that dopamine hit's kind of gone.
Exactly.
And then you're on to the next one.
You're chasing the next whilst you're paying off. Yeah. And it's realizing, for me, it's swapping this behavior and asking the question, where can I get dopamine hits from somewhere else? So,
yes, because this is part of it. And my next question is, Mel, do I really have to budget? Because I hate it. I don't want to give up my coffee and my nails and my, all of that stuff. And I think that that's what people, when they talk about money and the budget word comes in, or, we listen to you and we say, Afterpay, that's terrible. But don't take our joy, Mel. Don't take our joy. Where am I going to get my joy from?
So for joy. Okay. I'm never going to tell you to give up your daily latte. I love fashion. I'm never going to take your joy away. Okay. So for me, budgets don't work. So let's just say that. In the same way that diets don't work. So they're super restrictive. And the idea is that the same way that a diet, the research on diets, that you stick to a strict diet, and at the end of it, you put all the weight and then more back on.
Well, because you're in deprivation, right? You're hurt, you're in pain, you're in deprivation. You just can't wait for it to end.
Yeah. It's exactly the same theory for budgets. Instead, it's setting up a system that can't help but take you to where you want to go. And unfortunately, it's a little bit more complex than just a budget and a spreadsheet. But once it's set up, it is acting like a financial riptide where you can kind of sit back, relax, and spend guilt-free, knowing that you've automated and set things up to how you want to go. So, for example, it would involve looking at what you're spending now, what money's coming in, what's going out. There's no getting away from that. But what's left over? It's looking at what's your goals? What are you excited about? Like, what do you want to achieve by the next significant birthday? And what does that mean for the next 12 months? And then splitting up your bank account. If we're all trying to eat from the one account, it's the same as taking a big plate to a buffet. I've got my grandma's voice in my head saying, fill it up as high as it will go and then eat it all. A lot of us are doing that with our bank accounts. So splitting it up to multiple bank accounts and then automating it. So having a bills account, a savings account, an investing account, and a buffer account, and then the everyday account that's left, spending guilt-free with what's there. And then if you want more, it's finding more cash. And the COVID taught me that we don't know how to do that. We know how to tighten our belts, but we don't know how to find more cash. And I've got a freebie that is 50 plus ways to find 10K in 12 months because I realize that we don't know how to do that. So if you want more, if your goals are important to you, but you still want to play and do these other things, can you figure out how to find more cash to do those things?
That's so true. I don't know if that's a gender thing too, but that's so true because when people look at their situation, tightening the belt comes first. That's always the first thing people think about. And it's not to say that that's not
a good thing.
That's a good thing. Yeah. That's not to say that we shouldn't do that as well. But also there's the flip side to say, well, how can you actually bring more in?
Yeah.
And looking at, your nails and your latte and whatever else you're spending and saying, well, I don't want to give up that. Right. Well, you're going to have to bring more in, Claire. That's not, that's not weighing up at the end of the day.
And people will generally say to me when I say this, oh, but I don't have time for a second job and I don't want to start a business.
Yes.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So for some people, that's a great, easy way. But an example is, so I've got a girlfriend that they're renting, they've got a startup and they've got young kids. Their kids want a dog desperately. She knows that they can't afford it and they also can't really afford to go out and spend money on a weekend. So they signed up to Mad Paws, which is a site where you can get paid to dog sit or to dog walk. They minded a dog over a gorgeous little beagle pup over a long weekend. They got paid $65 a night for the privilege. The kids were entertained all weekend.
Oh, my goodness.
Didn't cost them a cent and they were paid.
Can you do this with children? You can just have one for a day and send it back. In all seriousness, I mean, that's
one of
what a solution
50 plus examples. Yeah.
Wow.
She, last Christmas, because she lives in a little bit of an affluent area, she went on the site and because there were people that think their dogs are their babies, were offering $2,000 to mind for 2 weeks. Like that's ridiculous money. And suddenly that pays for your Christmas, right? But if we don't know about this, there's sites where you can rent out your swimming pool, you can rent out your driveway, you can rent out your closet. Like we don't have to sell our time or our energy. There are so many ways to make money now. I don't even have to Uber drive. I could deliver stuff and it doesn't have to be smelly food. It could be Amazon delivery. I could be at home doing surveys or writing or there's so many things that I can do. Again, we just don't know about it.
I love it. And that's just brought about by the way we live now, right? And technology. So it's utilising all those.
Yeah.
And just coming back to when you said, splitting up your money into different bank accounts. I just sort of I swear there would have been many of us in previous generations who did that in a physical form.
Yep.
Who took the money
cash out and put it in envelopes.
Put it in the envelopes, labelled them all. This is actually not a new thing. I mean, that's how previous generations did it. And like many things in life and parenting and we did often what our mother did, what her mother did, and we followed that. And then, somewhere along the line with the various way the world's gone and the flood of information available to us, there was a bit of a change, I think, a departure from that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We don't have to do now what previous generations have done.
Definitely.
But in some ways, there's some lessons there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's not throwing everything out. It's figuring out, well, what can we adapt? What can we pick and choose? But more than just having the bank accounts, you got to automate because that way.
What do you mean by that?
So automate means setting up automatic payments so that it just happens without you having to click the button. Because otherwise something will happen and you'll go, you know what, I just won't do it that month. If you've got a mortgage, the bank doesn't say to you, pay that when you want, Claire, or if you don't pay it 1 month, I know you're good for it, just pay it next month. So it's acting like a bank manager for yourself and setting up direct debits so that money's taken out of your bank account. For me, when I do this, it's not even in the same bank because I don't want to have eyes on it. I don't have a card for it. Like it's understanding who you are and how you behave and setting up a financial system so that it's not reliant on our willpower or us having to figure out, do I have enough money for X, Y, Z?
It is. It's harnessing a lot of psychology there because as soon as the money comes in, it's gone.
Yeah.
You don't even see it.
Yep.
That's gone. You can't access it and it pays the bills.
Exactly.
Oh, it's just a lot. I mean, the decision fatigue that's just taken off you is huge.
And it was interesting. Like I was talking to someone recently where they were habits. They've done a PhD in habits and they said, willpower's like a muscle. And I expected them to say, the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. She said, instead, the more you exercise it, the more fatigued you get. So we're removing I know I'm overwhelmed by decisions and to-do lists. We're removing that fatigue by it just happening automatically for us. I don't have to hold that. I know it's taken care of.
Are there any other life periods, events, circumstances that you have seen with clients, people you have worked with that influence the way that they work with money? So one I'm thinking of as a psychologist is something like a neurodiversity condition like ADHD. Now, ADHD is marked by impulsivity. I mean, it's the hallmark. It's actually not what people think of a lack of attention. Yeah. It's impulsivity. It's the impulsivity disorder, which can present itself in many ways. So, one of the things when we're assessing people for ADHDs we look for is that act first, think later. And so that can come into a range of different things in their life. Yeah. But I often find that money is one, particularly later on in adulthood. Maybe they weren't diagnosed early on and later on that they're quite impulsive in their spending with this kind of we'll sort it out later, it'll all work out. I mean, in some ways it does sometimes, this kind of belief that it's okay. And so ADHD, I think, is one. I don't know if you have any kind of experience with that or other things that you think interplay with financial relationships.
Oh my gosh, ADHD is a massive one and I definitely am seeing more and more of that. We've actually just created a money lesson inside my program for habits for ADHD because I just think it's so important to address that.
Wow.
So for someone with ADHD, it is doing exactly like what you said. It's almost putting barriers around you so that you can still behave like you would but protected. Okay. So for someone with ADHD, it's really important not to have access to credit. It's really important not to have access to Afterpay. So just to be diligent about not accessing bad debts because you'll just keep spending. But it's also making sure that you are automating and over-automating, that you're using to-do lists. So there's some really great habits you can employ to do money well. But I think it's really important to say, yes, we want to curb some tendencies, but the other side of ADHD is creativity and hyperfocus. So it's also harnessing that and saying, can we gamify your finances and actually make it interesting and release your creativity? Someone with ADHD would love my 10K and 50.
It's almost like a challenge, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So it's making sure we don't just limit. We absolutely want to limit. We also want to make sure we're investing for the long term, and that's automated because ADHDers aren't necessarily going to think that's sexy or want to do it. But automate it, make it happen behind the scenes so it's not relying on you, and then put you to work over here with something interesting. But there's also life experiences I find that shape people financially, where it might be a divorce, where even it might be an age and stage. Certainly menopause and perimenopause is one that I'm seeing, where a woman might throw in her job, sell a business, leave her partner, come through menopause and go, oh, crap, I didn't mean to do that. Like now that I've got it under control, I don't know that I would have made those decisions.
Because of their menopause symptoms or perimenopause symptoms. Yep. And I have heard that. So they're more inclined to make those rash decisions or because of the way that they're feeling, attribute that to.
I've got brain fog. I don't think I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then they're maybe in their 50s at a time where they really need to be upping their potential income and super, and yet it's hard to find a job. It might be part-time work. So there's that as well that I'm seeing. So yeah, there's lots of different.
Layer it.
Yeah.
Can you teach young kids about money, and how young?
Not only can you, but you should.
Okay.
And really young. So I think you should be having financial conversations with children from as early as when you can speak. And it doesn't have to be, right, 3-year-old, let's sit down and talk about the share market and investing. But it might be, this card isn't a magic card. There's money in here and it's limited. So just start to explain that.
Yes, because this is, okay, so I have primary school age children and their response to most things is like, just tap the phone. Tap the phone. Yeah. It's not even a card anymore, right? So where's your phone? Like, what do you mean? Just get the phone out. So trying to explain to them that concept that there is a finite amount in the bank. And, you know, we are going, and maybe I'll get your thoughts on that, we are going a little bit more cashless, very much going cashless. And I do see with that being one of the consequences, that children don't have that, here are, you know, $10 in coins and I'm going to choose to give some away. And it's just like us spending at the shops. We're not seeing it. We're not handing it over. So I suppose for children, I can definitely see it in my children. They don't really have that concept that I'm trying to teach about, that, you know, that it is a finite amount.
Agree.
And then, you know, I talk to other certainly psychologists and people with child mental health, and, you know, is there a detriment to constantly going on to children about, you know, we don't have enough money and we don't have money and you can't buy that.
Then it's a money story to them. It's all around lack.
So then I start saying, no, we don't have enough money for that. So then I think, oh no, I don't want to give them that lack money story. So then I'm like, well, you know, and I'm just trying to provide that neutral response where they get it, but they're not panicking that mum's going to run out of money.
But I think if I can suggest a few things, so I would include them, but maybe consciously. So I've got a friend that as soon as her child was probably hit about 11, she would say, right, let's once a week, we're going to take it in turns to cook, and I'm not just going to leave you alone in the kitchen, but you get to choose 3 things from the pantry and you can spend $15 at the shops. So it teaches them when they go to the store, oh, wow, things cost and this doesn't go very far. So it teaches
very
them.
surprising, isn't it, how far $20 goes.
But it's those skills that then can set them up and also have them appreciation for how far things do and don't stretch. If you're going to give pocket money to kids, and I highly recommend that you do it via an app or a money card versus cash, because exactly as you said, I don't believe that small kids today are going to have cash or a lot of cash in the future. So get them used to dealing with digitized payments now.
I'm glad you said that, because it's just a pain in the ass going to find cash to give them. It's just, and you know, the cake stall at school still says bring $2 and every parent is cursing the cake stall. It's like, I don't have $2.
I don't have any coins.
So we can use one of those apps and they can see it on there and they can log in and have a look at what they've got.
And you can teach them to have multiple bank accounts and to move money to savings and all the things you're doing. And you may even say to them, hey, we do this. We have a bills account. We have a savings account. That's what we want you to set up as well. So it's modeling that beautiful behavior, but also teach them about share investing. And maybe it's something that you do together. So for example, the Australian share market has a game called the ASX game. So maybe as a family, you enroll and you do it together and you teach your kids about share investing, and maybe even encourage them to, you know, invest 10% of their pocket money or something, because you can micro invest now. Get them used to highs and lows of investing and talk them through risk profiles and market fluctuations. And it'll give you a language as well as giving them that beautiful gift of, I think a lot of parents would love to give their kids a leg up financially, and yet they can't afford to. How you give your child a leg up financially is teaching them early on how to really understand and hold digitized payments, and also how to invest.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually something practical that every single person can do. You know, if you're worried.
And it's a free game that you can play together, where you kind of you pit yourself against everyone in the country. So it's kind of fun too.
I love that. Okay, to finish off, I do want to touch a little bit on you've mentioned it through the podcast about investing, and some people have a very clear idea on what investing means, whether that be shares, property, other means. And some people just hear that word and go, I know I should be, I don't know. Tell me about what, and you just mentioned it then, micro investing is, and is that a good thing?
Yeah. So look, investing is simply whether it's building multiple income streams or building assets for the long term. Like that, in its simplest form, that's all that it is. It could be gold or silver, it could be bonds, it could be property, it could be shares. Hopefully it's a mix of all of them, because what we don't want is just to be investing in one thing. We want diversification.
Mm-hmm.
Micro investing. So one of the things that I love about technology today is that it makes it so easy for a lot of this to happen. So once upon a time with share investing, you had to have a couple of $1,000s as a minimum to invest, or that was certainly what the ASX recommended. Nowadays, you can invest with 20 cents.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So you need such small amounts to invest.
Because that's the barrier in most people's minds, right? Or most people that aren't investing, it's like, yeah, I know, but I don't have the money.
Large amounts. No. So you can round up, you can use cash back, or you can use tiny amounts to invest. But it's figuring out, what can I afford to? What are my long-term goals? What's important to me? So for example, more women that are investing will often want to invest in things where it's sustainable or it's ethical. It might be in an ETF, but once you choose it, it's just setting it up and then letting it go.
And I just can imagine that, like with most things, and, I've talked on this podcast before about confidence. People come to me as a psychologist and they often say, hey, I'm here because I'd like some confidence. And I joke about getting the jar of confidence and going, there you go. And then trying to explain to them that actually confidence comes after action, and that you need to take action for confidence to build. But I can imagine that for people out there that waiting for all the ducks to be lined up, waiting for everything to be perfect, then saying I don't have enough money, to take baby steps, it actually would not take very long before they go, oh, look at me go. Look at me on the markets.
Look at me on the apps.
Yeah.
Like $20 a week. I mean, almost everyone could do $20 a week. So maybe it is starting small, building up that confidence, socially distancing from the app rather than staring at every second and watching it go up and go down. So setting it and forgetting it. And just as you said, just starting. I absolutely agree that building confidence with finances is realizing you're going to stuff up because it's just a part of life. You're going to make missteps and make wrong decisions, and that's okay. You just is taking another step and keep going.
Love it. For anyone listening today, to finish off, who's listening to this saying, yeah, it's time, I'm going to need to stare in the mirror, rip the Band-Aid off, whatever analogy you want, and I need to really get a bit vulnerable. What are your tips that someone can do today who really is in the dark about where they sit with their finances? They're kind of just been trickling along here and really not don't have a firm grasp on where they're at. What are some key things that listeners can do right now to get started on improving their financial literacy?
So so I'm going to give you some free stuff and some non. So I think you, like anything, you just need to get interested. So it might be downloading a podcast and starting to listen regularly so that instead of it being something that is a vague notion, you just start to get used to the language of finance. And you might download a few different ones until you find the one that gels with you. And there's so
lots.
many out there.
I was going to say there's lots out there, right?
Out there.
By a range of people and ages, and
Definitely.
It really is. There's lots.
Yeah, there's investing specific podcasts. There's just general financial. There's so many. So it would be that. It might be reading a book if you're a reader, or listening to a book on Audible. And again, there's some general financial books, or there's investing in shares, there's investing in properties. So it's maybe start with what your need is. Is it something where it's a general thing? Is it more about investing that you want to know? There's classes you can do. So certainly that's something I do, where they're bite-sized classes. So yes, everything's Googleable and figure-outable, but sometimes that's more overwhelming. So you might choose to do one of my masterclasses or someone else's short courses, or there's longer courses like what I offer and what other people offer, where you might decide, you know what? I know that I just need to take myself through a process and spend a few months and really know that I've got this sorted.
Fantastic. And if people want to look at your courses, where can they find you?
So I'll give you a link to put in the show notes.
Great.
So that it's specific for you with a bunch of freebies and more. But if you want somewhere free to be constantly inspired, come over at Insta as well at melbrown.money. But melissabrown.com.au is where my courses, etc. live.
I love it. We just need to continue the conversation. Bring it into schools.
Oh,
that'd be fantastic. Start it with our kids.
Yeah.
Give that gift to the next generation. Take the steps. Find out what you don't know. Melissa, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for giving up your valuable time and joining me today on the couch. If today's conversation spoke to you, consider sharing the love and send it to someone you know who needs to hear it. Don't forget you can watch this full episode on my YouTube channel. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, all I ask is that you hit that subscribe button. It helps us to be able to deliver bigger and better content to you absolutely free of charge. If you've got comments or questions about today's episode, head on over and come hang out on Instagram, where you can follow and contact me. Okay, stay curious, stay connected, and join me next time on the couch. Take care. Okay, for those who've made it this far, just remember, even though I am actually a registered and qualified psychologist, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered professional individual advice.